I am a business elite, but I am betrayed by my most trusted wife and partners. Since that's the case, don't blame me for killing you all. At 3 a.m., I closed the financial report in my hand and rubbed my tired and sore eyes. The numbers on the screen are still beating. In 3 months, this is the 4th time that abnormal capital flow has been discovered. The amount is less than 5 million each time. It may not matter just by looking at it, but the cumulative amount has exceeded 200 million. What's even more strange is that almost all of these transactions happened late at night. I turned on the monitoring system and retrieved the screen when the funds were flowing. When the screen loaded, my hand hovered on the keyboard. The limbs were cold, as if the whole body was trapped in an ice cave. In the dim corridor in the surveillance, my wife Lu Ruyan and the company's largest partner, Jiboda, walked side by side. She walked into his office together in stilettos, wearing a Chanel suit, holding his arm intimately. That day I remembered that I was on a business trip outside and quickly entered the screen. An hour later, the two of them walked out one after another. Lu Ruyan's hair was slightly messy, and her cheeks were filled with an unnatural blush that made people see at a glance. Jiboda tidied up her collar. She giggled, patted his hand gently like a spoiled person, and then threw herself into my arms. I watched the entire video expressionlessly, gritted my teeth and clicked on the record files of the past 2 years. More intimate and unbearable scenes appear in front of you one after another. Kissing in the office, flirting in the elevator, and ambiguous entanglement in the parking lot. They acted recklessly, as if they regarded this shameful bed as a certain exciting game. Lu Ruyan, my wife, the legal director of the investment company, played such a scene with my partners again and again during my business trip. I stared at the screen, the coffee cup in my hand was tightly held tightly, and the hot liquid overflowed, scalding to the back of my hand. The hot pain suddenly came, but this pain was far inferior to the nausea and humiliation that surged in my heart at this moment. We have been married for 5 years, and I have been chasing him from the school beauty of the business school. This relationship has made countless people envious. I took him to great success, gave him a luxury of career status, and made him a winner in life. And what about him? What rewarded me was such a naked betrayal? The phone screen suddenly lit up, and a vibrating sound interrupted my thoughts. It was a message sent by Lu Ruyan. Husband, are you going to work overtime in the company tonight? I'll ask my aunt to send you some late-night snacks. I stared at the screen for a long time until the screen automatically dimmed, and a sarcastic smile flashed across my face. I put down the coffee cup, turned on my phone, and replied that I don't need to. I will go home immediately. Lies are fair to lies. It was almost 4 o'clock when I got home. The villa was dim and silent. Only a warm yellow bedside light came from the master bedroom. Pushing open the door, Lu Ruyan leaned against the head of the bed, wearing soft silk pajamas, holding documents in her hand. When I saw me, she bent her mouth and came back so late. She has been very busy with work recently. Her tone is as gentle as water, as if nothing happened. I changed into my pajamas and lay calmly beside her. After saying that, there were several projects that were about to be progressed and I was quite busy. She reached out and turned off the desk lamp, came over and rubbed my face intimately, and she must pay attention to her health. I just asked my secretary to order a batch of deep-sea fish oil today, and I will remember to eat it tomorrow. Warm words flow in the darkness, but I feel that the whole world is left with a biting sneer. 5 years he has always been the perfect wife in everyone's eyes. He is virtuous and gentle, successful in his career, but he never ignores his family. But now I understand that this is just a gentle trap she carefully woven. When she hugged her sideways, she snuggled into my arms and sighed in a low voice, as if this was her satisfaction with the happiness of marriage. She wrinkled her nose. And my husband, you smelled of coffee on your body, and you drank a lot of it. It was not good for your stomach. She blamed her softly, her voice still filled with pampering, but I didn't respond, just tightened my arms. He thought I was acting cute, and he smiled and patted my back. The scenes that surged in my mind made me unable to calm down. A few hours ago, did he snuggle in Jiboda's arms like this? Do you also care about the man's every move with the same gentle voice? In the darkness, I suppressed the surging anger and survived the night with him. In the blink of an eye, he fell asleep peacefully and breathed peacefully. But I am sober like never before. Early the next morning, I pretended to say that I would have a meeting, so I turned down the promise of having breakfast with him. When I got into the car, I dialed a familiar number. On the other end of the phone, I picked up a private detective I had worked with for many years. The right-hand assistant who helped me find out the dirty background of my business rival. I will thoroughly check all the contact records, communication interface, and capital flows between Lu Ruyan and Jiboda. I went straight to the point with a depressing coldness in my tone. He pondered for a moment and understood how long it was to check. At least 2 years ago, I rubbed my temples and then changed my mouth to check. 3 years I had to know when their trick started. After hanging up the phone, I opened the information I brought back from the company's finance department last night. It was full of the company's cross-border transaction records. It seemed that everything was normal and the data was normal. However, when I carefully sorted out the ins and outs of every money, that was hidden in the facts below the surface impacted me. Gilberta's company was secretly acquiring shares of my company. Behind all this, the driving force was my wife Lu Ruyan. Her identity as a legal director is an excellent weapon, which can help Gilberta successfully complete the acquisition without anyone noticing it. Thinking of Gilberta's appearance in the past 2 years, he kept calling me the intimacy of his brother. It turned out that with such deep scheming, she plundered me little by little. My wife also tried to take over my company. As for Lu Ruyan, the woman I once trusted actually became his capable leader. When I arrived at the company, I went to see a few core directors first and talked about some irrelevant business. When I returned to the office, I happened to see Lu Ruyan coming out of the tea room with 2 cups of coffee. He showed a familiar smile. "You didn't have breakfast. I just made the coffee and was about to send it to you." His smile was as gentle as before, but the scene in the surveillance last night flashed in my mind. This woman used such a gentle expression to serve Gilberta coffee. I sneered in my heart, but she was still calm on the surface. I didn't need to go out for a while. After pushing him away with a smile, I asked casually, "Would Mr. G come today?" He raised his hand slightly and looked at the watch. He made an appointment at 3 p.m. I had prepared a new cooperation plan. "Let's talk together." I nodded and responded, turned around and entered the office. The moment he was at the door, the disguised smile on his face completely disappeared. When I sat in front of the computer, I called out the recent financial statements of Gilberta Company. The lines of people stared at the data and finally found some tricks. The source of funds for every purchase of our company's shares was not clean, and there were many ulterior motives hidden on it. I pressed the inside line and called Vice President Chisili, and handed him the sorted information to him to check Gilberta's recent sources of funds, especially these large amounts of money transfers. It is necessary to figure out the transaction behind each account. Chisili took the document and turned around without saying a word. I sat upright and continued to adjust Lu Ruyan's company files. The documents he handled were piled up like a mountain, and Gilberta was able to be prosperous in the mall, and it may not be without his push. My marriage, my company, 2 of the most real things were actually calculated by them. The phone was shocked. It was a preliminary investigation report sent by a private detective. I clicked the attachment. A photo on the screen jumped out clearly. In the hotel suite, Lu Ruyan knelt on the carpet, tilting her head to kiss Gilberta. The intoxicated expression made my heart hurt. The exact time was marked below the photo. 2 years and 3 months ago, we were married for less than 3 years. I put down my phone, closed my eyes and took a deep breath. When I opened it again, my eyes had returned to calm. Since they liked acting, I would accompany me to the end, but the ending of this scene it won't be as they wished. At 3 p.m., Gilberta stepped on the company he came to. He was wearing a delicate suit, and from the collar to the cuffs, he looked decent, and with that signature smile, he looked very decent. As soon as he entered the door, he opened his arms and rushed over enthusiastically. His voice was loud and a little magnetic. "Oh, my brother, long time no see." I curled the corners of my mouth and greeted him. "Yes, the last time I met you was on the golf course, right? Sit down skillfully and follow the trend, the tie on the necklace with a comfortable face." It was a great time to beat that day. I made another appointment. I nodded gently. Of course, there was no problem with the response. As soon as he finished speaking, Lu Ruyan pushed the door and walked in, holding a stack of documents in his hand. He nodded slightly, greeted him, and his movements were neat. Then he sat down at the conference table. "Mr. G, this is a new round of cooperation plan we have planned." His tone was as usual, and he was not professional. He handed the documents to us. "You can read it first. Look, if there is anything that needs to be modified, please mention it." I pretended to be seriously looking down and flipping through the documents. In fact, my mind had already floated out of the corner of my eyes. His eyes were on Lu Ruyan. His eyes were too hot and uncomfortable. At this time, Lu Ruyan seemed to be unable to feel it. She sat upright on the chair, like a standard workplace strong woman, but her slightly trembling fingers when flipping through the documents exposed some uneasiness. The meeting was delayed for 2 hours. The question looks very important from the progress of the project to the future trend. It was not until the end that I made a statement like a chat. "By the way, I found that some funds were not right recently. Can the legal department help me check it?" Lu Ruyan's movements were slightly slow, but he soon recovered from nature. "Okay, I will arrange someone to investigate immediately. He is polite and straightforward, so I will have to work on Director Lu." Gilberta's smile is meaningful and he does not forget to praise him. I am absolutely at ease with Director Lu's ability. I can definitely check it clearly. I looked at the expressions of the 2 of them. The more I pretended to be nothing, the more guilty I felt. There was one thing in front of me and another thing behind me. How long can this scene be performed? When the meeting ended, everyone was dispersed. I quickly turned on the surveillance. In the picture, Lu Ruyan stood at the end of the corridor and whispered. He seemed to have noticed something. "I know, you don't worry, I will deal with it. Turn off the surveillance." I walked to the window and looked out at the city outside, the traffic flow and the towering buildings. Everything is as busy as usual. I have been doing well in the shopping malls over the years, but I didn't expect that the person next to me had already betrayed me. "Forget it, since you dare to play, I will accompany you to the end. I want to see if it is your skillful means or my counterattack is harsh enough." At night, I pushed the social event and went home early. Lu Ruyan was busy cooking. When she heard the sound of the door opening, she turned around and looked over. Why did she come back so early? There was a bit of surprise in her words. I came from behind, holding her waist, leaning over to her ear, softly teasing her if she misses you. "And you looked very good when you were in the meeting today." She froze for a second, Then she returned to nature. Just your mouth was sweet. I took my hand back, opened the refrigerator door, took a can of beer, stood at the kitchen door, looked at his busy back, and asked casually that you have lost a lot of weight recently. Is there anything? He turned back and looked at me, and explained inadvertently that maybe you were busy with work recently. Yes, I'm quite busy. I took a sip of beer. My tone was plain but with deep meaning. As expected, his movements paused again, but in the end he continued to cut vegetables as if nothing had happened. Fortunately, it was all my business. I put down the empty wine jar, and I walked to him and asked if I needed help. He didn't need to smile and wave his hand. Go and watch TV. The food will be ready soon. Looking from the mirror, her expression was still so gentle, just like a conscientious and good wife. How could I see any flaws? 5. This person has always been so perfect. Until now, I only know what is hidden behind all the perfections. During the meal, she specially added a piece of sweet and sour ribs and put them in my bowl to taste. I took a bite and it was indeed a familiar taste. This sweet and sour ribs were once my favorite. Every time he made this dish, he carefully put it in his mouth, but now the familiar taste is left with an indescribable bitterness. I asked casually what happened this afternoon. How are you looking? Lu Ruyan was busy serving me soup, but her hand suddenly shook and almost spilled the soup. She responded that she had already checked it, and immediately told me when there was a result. She took the soup she handed over and couldn't comfort her with a smile. I believe you, her expression was obviously relaxed, but I don't know if it was an illusion in my eyes, but there was a hint of panic that was difficult to capture. She said softly that I must live up to your trust. After dinner, I sat alone in the study to process the documents. How long does it take for the phone to vibrate slightly? It was the second investigation report sent by a private detective. I clicked it and saw that the screen was densely packed with records of Lu Ruyan and Gilberta, the hotel's private club, and even photos of them on vacation abroad. In the photos, Gilberta hugged her waist, stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of the luxury hotel, and kissed her. She was wearing a bikini and lying on the sunny beach chair, allowing him to lean down and kiss her cheek. The photos were taken across. It lasted for 2 years, and was updated almost every month. Before and after each meeting, Lu Ruyan's private account would receive a large transfer, from hundreds of thousands at the beginning to millions now. My eyes were fixed on those photos, but my thoughts had long been withdrawn. My wife was able to increase her price several times while betraying herself. The door of the study was gently knocked, and Lu Ruyan's voice sounded, "Husband, I made tea for you." I quickly turned off the computer screen, adjust the expression, pretending to be nothing. He answered in. He walked up to me with tea, put the cup aside, reached out to hug my neck from behind, and blamed him like a spoiled reproach. He was still busy so late, and he didn't know how to cherish himself. I held his palm and slapped my fingertips gently, and his tone was gentle without a trace. It would be enough for you to feel sorry for me. He put his chin on my shoulder, chuckled, and joked that he was smooth and smooth. I turned around, pulled her into her arms, her eyes fixed on her face in the darkness, and then asked Lu Ruyan if you love me. She was stunned for a moment, but soon approached my face, and her smile naturally showed a hint of charm. Of course I love her, otherwise how could I marry you? I hugged her, and the tip of my nose passed through the familiar perfume smell between her neck, but the familiar smell only made me feel disgusted at this moment. Who has touched that smell repeatedly from this afternoon? Such tenderness is in his heart. How many minutes are there again? At noon the next day, I specially asked the financial director to have dinner together. While handing him a cigar, I mentioned casually that the funds flow in the account recently looked a little wrong. Please check it, especially for these cross-border transfers. He took the cigar and his expression was obviously hesitant. Director Lu, I had a calm tone but I couldn't discuss it. I didn't need to notify him about this matter, I would only report it to me. He nodded and I further reminded that this matter must be absolutely confidential. When he returned to the company building after dinner, he happened to meet Gilberta. He walked out of the elevator, smiled at me, patted my shoulder, and spoke in a consistent warm tone. He wanted me to go back to the company. I just talked about the project with Director Lu, and I also returned with a smile. I asked President Ji to trouble him. He waved his hand and pretended to be loyal. He should have a meal together when he had time tonight. I used the excuse to refuse and make an appointment another day. After watching him leave, I took out my hand. I sent a message to Gilberta. After checking the recent itinerary, he replied to a message. I returned to the office and turned on my computer, and retrieved Lu Ruyan's personal profile. My resume was as impressive as ever. A top student from a prestigious law school in a prestigious university has achieved some success during his internship. 2 years after work, he was promoted to a partner of a law firm. He was enviable every step. Unfortunately, he generously spread his talent in areas that he was unwilling to get involved. I continued to search and load out these things. It is no surprise that he has been in charge of the projects he has handled in recent years. He is personally responsible for any cooperation related to Gilberta. He takes action accurately at critical moments every time to gain clear advantages for Gilberta. In just 2 years, Gilberta has been able to expand its assets on a large scale. Lu Ruyan has an indelible contribution. At this time, the inside phone rang, and it was Chi Silly's voice. The boss has an important situation to report to you. I asked him to come in and speak. He walked in with a stack of documents with a depressed expression. I was a little uneasy and handed me the materials. This was the result of the detailed investigation of Gilberta's funding source. Most of the assets came from several offshore companies. I flipped through the information and glanced over every record, but my fingers silently clasped the documents. My face gradually became colder with the numbers. Behind these offshore companies, our competitors were involved. Whenever the funds arrived, Gilberta would always take the opportunity to acquire a batch of shares in our company. Behind this series of actions, it means he not only betrayed my cooperative relationship, but also secretly colluded with his opponents, planning to annex my company and continue to investigate. I threw a thick stack of information on the table and gave special advice, especially to keep an eye on the shareholders of these offshore companies, and don't let go of any of them. After Zisri left, I quickly turned on the computer and called out Lou Ruyan's work log. I flipped through pages. My guess was terrible. During this period, he frequently appeared in competitors' companies. On the surface, he was talking about the so-called negotiation affairs, but the actual situation was clear at a glance. He was making a bridge for Gilberta, and a sneer floated on the corner of his mouth. I took out the recording pin on the table and pressed the play button. A record of the conversation between Lou Ruyan and Gilberta rang. He had asked the finance department to check the accounts. We have to be cautious, don't worry, I have arranged it all. He couldn't find the key information. Gilberta's tone was confident, but Lou Ruyan's voice was a little uneasy. Don't worry. Gilberta interrupted him. In a few months, as soon as the acquisition plan is completed, everything will be over. I will take you abroad and no longer have to be bound by him. When I heard this, I pressed the pause button. My eyes were deep. Very good. You dare to play so much, so I will not show mercy. That night, when I got home, Lou Ruyan was already lying on the bed and fell asleep. I walked to the edge of the bed with a light footstep. She seemed to be alarmed, turned over lazily, and said vaguely to her husband, "You're back, okay, go to bed." I helped her tuck the corner of the quilt. She obediently moved towards me and fell asleep again. Looking at her quiet sleeping face, the scene of the first time I saw her appeared in my mind. It was when we first met. She was still intern in the law firm, and I just took over the family business. The first time we met was at a business dinner. She was wearing a simple black dress, standing in the corner looking distracted. I walked over with a wine glass and asked, "A cup?" She smiled and shook her head and refused. "I still have to work later." A simple conversation made me miss it from now on. The process of pursuing her was not easy, but I never gave up. Finally, after a year of hard work, she agreed to my proposal. After marriage, she not only achieved success in her career, but also managed her family meticulously. We never make a big fuss. She always tolerated my bad temper. Everyone envied me and married such a virtuous and perfect wife. We regarded them as model couples, but now I understand that her tenderness, her considerateness, and even her perfection are all carefully designed scams. I felt cold in my heart. I turned over and got out of bed, went to the study, turned on the computer, and carefully checked Gilberta's itinerary. In 3 days, he would fly to M country to negotiate and pass the peace. When a private detective came, the news showed that he actually bought 2 air tickets and a hotel. The reservation was obvious. He planned to take Lou Ruyan with him and looked at the time at 2 a.m. I called Chisili and asked him to go to Yen State with me the day after tomorrow. After hanging up the phone, I sent another message to the detective, asking him to keep a close eye on Lou Ruyan and Gilberta. They would definitely reveal their flaws during this trip to the south. Putting down my phone, I walked to the window. The night enveloped the entire city, and the lights were dotted like stars. My eyes were full of coldness, and I thought to myself, Lou Ruyan, do you think this is an impeccable betrayal? Then let's wait and see. The next morning, I went to the company as usual, and Lou Ruyan was already in the meeting. He was waiting in the meeting room. When he saw me come in, he handed me a document and said, "Honey, this is the report compiled by the finance department yesterday." I took the document and roughly flipped through a few pages. The information looked flawless. It was full of fake accounts designed by him carefully. If I hadn't been prepared in advance, this report would be flawless. "Thank you for your hard work," he said with a smile and a gentle tone. "Are you too tired recently? Your face doesn't look very good." He was stunned and touched his face subconsciously. "Is it possible that you haven't had much rest recently? Okay, I'm going to country. I'm on a business trip the day after tomorrow. Do you want to come with me?" I asked casually just to relax. A trace of panic flashed across his eyes, but he quickly concealed it and shook his head and said, "No, there are still a lot of things to do at the company." "Okay, then you should have a good rest." I nodded and said, "No." After reluctantly finishing the meeting and returning to the office, a text message arrived as scheduled, saying that the itinerary for the day after tomorrow had been confirmed and everything was going according to plan. It was sent by Gilberta. On the surface, this message seemed to be mentioning the merger and acquisition case, but I knew that he was confirming with Lou Ruyan that the arrangements for their elopement were ready. Very good, let me see it. Let's see, how far can you jump? I raised a sneer on my lips and deleted all the text messages in my mobile phone. At noon, Lou Ruyan knocked on the door and asked me carefully if I wanted to have lunch together. I didn't even raise my head and sorted out a pile of documents on the table. "No, I have an appointment with the client, you go by yourself." He nodded and turned to leave. At the moment when he held the door handle, I suddenly called him, paused in front of him, turned around and said to come back early in the evening. He was stunned for a moment. "I want to have lunch with you," I said calmly. As if he had not noticed the unnatural look that flashed across his face, he suddenly revealed a faint smile. "Okay, I'll try to come back early," and then walked out the door with brisk steps. As soon as the door was closed, I immediately turned on the monitor. The surveillance screen broadcast his movements live to the second, exactly as expected. He went straight to the parking lot and got on the passenger seat of Gilberta's black car. They probably thought I was going on a business trip today, so they became more unscrupulous. I was too lazy to investigate further, so I immediately ordered people to keep a close eye on them. It didn't take long. I received the photos not long ago. In a private room of a high-end restaurant, Lou Ruyan was like a playful cat, nestling in Gilberta's arms. The two raised their glasses to toast. G. Boda muttered a few words in a low voice. I don't know what he said, but it made her laugh so hard that tears came out. Every photo was clear and dazzling, but I kept my usual expressionless face. I turned off my phone, walked to the safe, and took out the divorce agreement that the lawyer had already prepared. The content of the agreement clearly listed the evidence of Lu Ruyan's cheating and several illegal acts. It was thorough enough. Destroy everything he has, ruin his reputation, and even put him in jail. Of course, there is no need to rush to use this thing now, but just in case, it is always good to have one more hand prepared. I handed the agreement to the notary with a calm mood, as if I had completed a daily task that must be done. When I returned home in the evening, there was a light sound of spatulas colliding in the kitchen. Lu Ruyan was actually busy cooking. Hearing the noise, she turned her head and smiled sweetly. I made your favorite dish tonight. I walked straight over and gently hugged her waist from behind. Why did you suddenly? She has become so virtuous. She turned around and put her hands on my shoulders naturally. Isn't it because you are going on a business trip? I want you to remember the taste of home when you are away. I lowered my head and kissed her. She quickly responded. After the kiss, she pushed me with a smile and said, Go wash your hands quickly. The food will be cold soon. Looking at her delicate face, I suddenly asked Lu Ruyan softly, If one day I never come back, will you be sad? She was stunned for 2 seconds, then smiled and said angrily, What nonsense are you talking about? No, I stared into her eyes and slowly spit out, I will definitely come back. The day after tomorrow morning, I arrived at the airport on time. Lu Ruyan got up early and accompanied me to the terminal hall. When we parted, her eyes were red. She also reminded me to be careful and not to come back too late. I touched his head and said in an unusually gentle voice, Don't worry, I'll be back soon. Then I turned around and saw from the corner of my eye that he was typing quickly on his mobile phone with his head down. Obviously, he was notifying the man that I had left. After the plane took off, I leaned back in my seat and closed my eyes to rest. Not long after, the flight attendant came over with a dining cart and handed me a document. It was a new report just sent by the investigator. When I opened it, I saw the latest developments of G. Boda and Lu Ruyan. They had boarded a flight to Country M half an hour ago. Obviously, they were planning to elope with the opportunity of the merger and acquisition case. In the surveillance photos, Lu Ruyan was wearing sunglasses and a mask, and G. Boda was dressed casually. They looked like an intimate couple traveling. I felt a little ironic. They really thought that they could get rid of everything by fleeing abroad. 10 hours later, we arrived in Shore Country. It was already dark. On the way to the hotel, Chi Silly drove me there. He tilted his head and said, We've booked another hotel at G. Boda's place. Do you want to make any arrangements? I said, No need. I waved my hand and said, Just proceed as planned. After arriving at the hotel and washing up briefly, I headed straight to the headquarters of the MA company. The negotiations went better than I expected. The other party obviously didn't expect me to be there in person. It was already 9 p.m. when the contract was officially signed. There were a few more unread messages on my phone, all from Lu Ruyan. He asked me if everything went well. I arrived at Lee, so why didn't I answer his call? I stared at the screen for a few seconds and casually replied that I was in a meeting. Then I stood up and told someone to follow up on G. Boda's movements. In less than 10 minutes, the private detective sent me the location. They were currently in a Michelin restaurant. When I arrived at the restaurant, I stood outside the French window and saw clearly that Lu Ruyan was wearing a champagne-colored backless long dress, as bright and beautiful as a blooming poppy. She sat opposite G. Boda with a gentle and sweet smile. G. Boda came close to her and whispered in her ear, which made her cover her mouth from time to time. Smile, that picture so sweet that people almost forget that she has a family. I took out my mobile phone to record this scene, then turned and left, and sent a message to Chi Silly. Let's take action. When I returned to the hotel, it was already late at night. I sat in front of the transparent floor-to-ceiling window, sipping wine alone, waiting for news. The screen of my mobile phone lit up and went out intermittently, and the screen was full of Lu Ruyan's caring text messages, asking if her husband was asleep, why didn't she answer the phone if she was too tired, and to remember to eat on time. My eyes swept over these words, but the corners of my mouth did not fluctuate at all. His warmth seemed to be separated by a layer of glass that could not touch my heart. At this time, the phone vibrated violently, and Chi Silly's name flashed on the screen. I picked it up and waited quietly. He said, Boss, everything is done. There was a hint of pride in his voice. I put down the wine glass, raised my eyebrows and asked if it was filmed. It was all recorded. Not a single shot of the transaction between G. Boda and the blonde woman was missing. After hanging up the phone, I couldn't wait to click on the video he sent. In the picture, G. Boda and a blonde woman were sitting in a booth and talking. The business was in full swing, and not far away from them, Lu Ruyan stood quietly with a wine glass in her hand, her face as blue as frost. I couldn't help but sneer in my heart. Was he angry for G. Boda? This scene was very familiar to me. G. Boda was indeed a scheming businessman. In order to swallow this merger and acquisition case, he did everything he could to get close to the company's CFO. However, Lu Ruyan regarded all this as a betrayal of feelings. He thought G. Boda really loved him and wanted to take him out of the swamp, but he didn't know that he was just in G. Boda's hands. It's just a chess piece used against me. The business world is like a battlefield. There is no such thing as sincerity, only interests. The video continued to play. Lu Ruyan couldn't hold back her anger after all. She picked up the wine glass and rushed to G. Boda, splashing a glass of red wine on his face. G. Boda lost control of his anger in an instant. He grabbed his wrist and tried to teach him a lesson, but Lu Ruyan still struggled to break free. The scene stopped abruptly. A disdainful smile appeared on the corner of my mouth. I sent a message to the private detective. asking if he had found out where they were staying. A reply came soon: Pacific Hotel Room 1805. I looked up at the clock in the room. The hour hand pointed to 1 a.m. They were probably back to the hotel at this time, maybe still arguing, maybe they had reconciled. No matter what, I never cared about these. Picking up the phone, I called Chi Silly, and according to the original plan, I would take action tomorrow. The next morning, I showed up on time in the meeting room of the acquirers company. Across the negotiation table, G. Boda was pale and stunned. He obviously didn't expect me to show up suddenly, and what he didn't expect was that I also took out a new acquisition plan. He suppressed his anger and stared at me. What does this mean? Didn't we agree on it yesterday? I looked relaxed and even smiled. Sorry, I changed my mind at the last minute. He stood up in pain and slammed his palm on the table, but was blocked by my hand. The situation was interrupted. I asked Chi Silly to distribute the copies of the new plan one by one. The seated MA executives immediately flipped through the documents. The screen in front of them was brightly lit. Their eyes brightened with every page they read. In G. Boda's eyes, every detail was like a sharp blade piercing his self-esteem. The blonde woman sitting next to him closed the documents and said with a casual smile, "This plan is indeed more reasonable. We think that Mr. Liu's proposal is more in line with our interests." G. Boda was struck by lightning and slumped in his chair. He certainly understood that this meant that everything he had planned for a long time was completely shattered, and those competitors who relied on him to place their bets would also lose everything. Looking at his distraught appearance, I could hardly suppress my sneer. Unfortunately, this was just an appetizer. After the negotiation, news about Lu Ruyan came unexpectedly. "Hubby, are you busy? I miss you so much." A night of quarrel made him think of me as his husband again. I was too lazy to touch the message on the screen. I just turned on the recorder from last night. "What the hell are you doing to me? He is a senior executive of the company, but you spoke to him so intimately. Should I pretend that I don't care? Lu Ruyan, don't forget our plan. When the merger is successful, I will take you away after getting the money, but before that, you better be quiet and don't make trouble for me." It was all obvious. The recording ended. The silence in the room made me feel ironic. Back to the hotel, I asked Chi Silly to book a flight out of Hong Kong for tonight. I explained everything before leaving. "You know how to do the rest." Chi Silly nodded at me. "Don't worry, boss." The late-night plane landed at my hometown airport. It was dark, and the villa was as quiet as if no one was there. Only the light from the master bedroom on the second floor was shining. I pushed open the door and saw Lu Ruyan was curled up in bed, browsing her phone. When she saw me coming back, her eyes lit up instantly, and she rushed over to hug me, complaining nonstop why she didn't answer my call and making me worry to death. I stood there and let him hug me, and after a long while I spoke softly. "In country, is it fun?" As soon as he finished speaking, his body froze as if struck by lightning, but he quickly recovered, laughing and pretending to be stupid. "What in country? I've been at home all the time." I let go of him and turned to the computer desk. "Really?" I tapped my fingers on the keyboard a few times, and what popped up on the screen was evidence that was hard to look at. It was an intimate photo of him and G. Boda in a restaurant, and a video of the two of them kissing in the hotel lobby. Lu Ruyan's face turned pale instantly, and she hurriedly explained with a trembling voice. I sneered and interrupted him. There was no need to say more. "I knew all about your good deeds." He said nothing, but the next second he knelt on the ground and grabbed my trouser legs. "Husband, listen to my explanation." I was deceived by him. I looked at him coldly, and the mockery could not be hidden in my voice. "Did he deceive you to help him transfer funds, deceive you to disclose secrets, or deceive you to climb into his bed?" Every word I said was like a knife cutting into his heart. Seeing his face gradually becoming ugly, I continued, "Everything you have done over the years, I know everything clearly, including your plan to run away to Ongwa to escape the marriage." Lu Ruyan raised her head suddenly, her eyes full of fear. You know everything." She looked down at him with a sneer on her lips. "Otherwise, why do you think G. Boda's merger and acquisition case failed?" He slumped on the ground, moved his lips a few times but couldn't say anything. I revealed in a cold voice that he had no intention of running away with you. These days he has been planning how to swallow up our company, and you are just a chess piece he is using. As I said, I pulled out a call record and played the recording of G. Boda's conspiracy with his competitors. Lu Ruyan looked ashen, with his ruthless, contemptuous voice in her ears. "Lu Ruyan, that stupid woman thought I really loved her. When I get control of the company, I will be the first she dumped him." Tears welled up in Lu Ruyan's eyes. She shook her head and murmured to herself, "Impossible, impossible." I watched coldly, as if watching a play, and continued to play the recording. G. Boda's voice was full of disdain. He was just a face. He could be with a rich man. In the final analysis, he was just like those women on the street. Lu Ruyan finally collapsed, covered her ears tightly with her hands and cried out, "Enough, don't let it go." I glanced at him, turned off the audio, slowly squatted down. His tone was cold without a trace of warmth. "Now you know how stupid you are. For a man who doesn't love you at all, you ruined your family. Is it worth it?" He grabbed my arm, his eyes full of despair. "I'm sorry, I really know I was wrong." My eyes cut through his like a sharp blade. "The soul knows it was wrong. Then you are sad that you were deceived. If G. Boda really took you away, you should be enjoying wealth and glory now. I will kneel here to apologize." He shook his head violently and cried, "It's not like that. I really regret it. Please forgive me." I shook his hand away and said word by word, "It's too late." I stood up and took out a document from the drawer and put it in front of him. "This is a divorce agreement. Sign it now." He took the document tremblingly. When his eyes fell on the conditions on it, his whole body trembled. "This is too much." I interrupted with a sneer. "It's too much. Compared with going to jail, isn't this a better choice? The terms of the agreement clearly stated that he must leave the house after the divorce, and is not allowed to work in the financial industry for life. For an ambitious person who wants to turn the tide, this agreement will undoubtedly completely expel him from the world he most yearns for. He held the pen and his hands were shaking like a sieve when he signed his name. Looking at his embarrassed appearance, there was no ripple in my heart, and I even felt a little happy. This is the price of betrayal. The next day I sent the divorce agreement to the notary office, and Lu Ruyan seemed to have been drained of all her strength. She curled up on the bed lifeless. As soon as I pushed the door open, she immediately raised her head. Her red and swollen eyes were full of pleading looks, and she asked me in a trembling voice, "Can you give me another chance?" The corners of my mouth pulled up slightly, but I laughed mockingly. "Opportunity, when you betrayed me, did you ever think of giving me a chance?" He couldn't make a sound after hearing that, but just bit his lips tightly and tears burst out again. I glanced at his embarrassed appearance, and actually found it a little funny. I stopped and looked at him. "From the moment I found out about you, from the incident until now, I have been thinking about a question." Lu Ruyan was in a daze, staring at me, as if grasping the last ray of hope. "How exactly have I let you down? I have arranged your life at home meticulously. I fully support you at work, and even try to accommodate your little emotions, but why do you still treat me like this?" My words were getting colder and colder, like sharp needles piercing his heart. His lips opened and closed slightly, but he couldn't utter a word. I shook my head, turned and walked out the door. "Forget it, there is no point in saying these now. The shareholders' meeting will be next week. You'd better think clearly about how to face it." Just as I was holding the doorknob, he suddenly called out behind him, "Wait, how is Jiboda?" I stopped, turned my head, and my eyes were as cold as an ice. "What do you think?" Soon after I walked out, the private detective sent a message that Lu Ruyan had called Jiboda more than a dozen times, but no one answered. I couldn't help laughing and thought to myself, Jiboda can't protect himself now, so how can he take care of him? And this is just the beginning. The next morning, Jiboda was taken away by the police. One of the suspects was embezzlement, illegal operation of similar businesses, and misappropriation of public funds. All the charges combined would probably be enough for him to spend 10 years in prison. The news was quickly broadcast on the news. Lu Ruyan was checking her phone at the dining table. After hearing the news, her hand slipped and the phone fell to the ground. I was sipping my coffee slowly, and when I heard the sound, I looked up at him. Why did I feel so distressed? His face was as pale as a piece of paper, and his hands were tightly holding the phone, trembling slightly. You were ready, but I put down the coffee cup and replied coldly. "What else? Do you really think I didn't notice it at all? It's impossible that I didn't know anything in these years." Lu Ruyan's tears fell. Her eyes were terrified and desperate. "Then why didn't you do something earlier? Why did I smile coldly?" "Of course, I have to wait until all your evil deeds are done, and then I will close the net all at once. You have spent a lot of effort to lay out the plan, but you don't know that I have already seen through it, which has led to the situation today." Hearing this, he collapsed in his chair, and his voice was like sandpaper rubbing against his earlobes. "You are so cruel and I am so cruel." I can't help but laugh sarcastically, staring at his face as pale as a dead person. "When you betrayed me, why didn't you feel that you were cruel?" Then I took out my mobile phone and played a video I had just received. On the screen, Jiboda was like crazy in the police station, identifying Lu Ruyan was the manipulator behind the scenes, and she also said that she was seduced by him. I handed the phone to him. Look at what your lover looks like now." His eyes gradually blurred. Looking at Jiboda's hideous face on the screen, his body trembled uncontrollably. I turned off the video coldly, with an unfathomable chill in my tone. "I can't stand it. Don't worry, the show has just begun." Sure enough, when Lu Ruyan was summoned and taken away by the police in the afternoon, he had completely collapsed. In the evening, I received news that he confessed all his crimes in the interrogation room, including how to use his position to help Jiboda transfer funds and how to steal business secrets. Seems that he is finally afraid. The night is deeply shrouded. I stand in front of the French window, light a cigar, and look at the thick and inky night outside the window. My reflection is clear and sharp. This revenge is far from over. A week later, the shareholders' meeting was held as scheduled. The conference room was packed and everyone was waiting with bated breath. I stood on the stage, unfolded the materials in my hand, and revealed the truth to the participants. The projector lit up, and the crimes of Lu Ruyan and Jiboda were displayed to everyone without reservation. As the company's legal director, Ruyan used her position to leak commercial secrets, and Jiboda used this information to try to maliciously acquire the company. All the evidence of the shares was as solid as an iron barrel and could not be refuted. The audience exploded. Some people slammed the table and cursed this bitch, while others opened their eyes wide and sighed. "Mr. Lu, you have raised an ungrateful person." I looked around at everyone with contempt in my voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is their true face. Now the police have intervened, and I will use legal means to defend the company." The meeting was over. Shareholders gathered around to show their support, threatening to bring the two men to justice. I smiled on the surface but snorted in my heart. These people were just watching the fun. If Jiboda succeeded, you would have changed your faces long ago. When I got home at night, I found that Lu Ruyan's things had been moved out, leaving only a letter, lying quietly on the dining table. The letter vaguely said, "Husband, I'm sorry. I know I am unforgivable." I pinched the letter, tore it into pieces and threw it into the trash can. This home has never been his safe haven. Since he chose to betray, he should have understood that there would be this day. I opened the safe and took out an investigation report. This is detailed information about Lu Ruyan's parents. Looking at those pages of paper, cold thoughts lingered in my mind. Since he didn't learn to know if you are not a human being, then don't blame me for killing you. The next morning, Lu Ruyan's parents came to my door, crying and crying. The old couple begged, "Please let Yanning go." He was still young and confused for a moment. They stared at them coldly without a trace of mercy. Can youth hurt others casually? Lu wiped the tears from his face with his sleeve with a sad face. He already knew he was wrong. Let him be spared this time. Hearing the 3 words "forgive him," I couldn't help but chuckle with sarcasm in my smile. I walked to the cabinet beside, took out a document, threw it on the ground and said, "Let's take a look at this first." The documents were scattered in front of them. In front of them was a weird land transfer contract. I knew clearly that Lu Ruyan actually used his parents' name and my money to buy several plots of land in his hometown, and then used a price far higher than the market price, sold it to Jiboda Shell Company. Father Lu picked up the contract tremblingly, his eyes wandering, his lips trembling. This is true. I looked at them sarcastically. Yes, your daughter not only used my money to secretly collude with others, but also used your name to launder money. If this matter gets out, do you think you can get away with it? After the words fell, the old couple collapsed to the ground. Their faces were pale, as if the world collapsed. I looked down at them. Uncle Lu gives you 2 choices, either face legal sanctions or sell the land to me, and then leave this city forever. But the Lu family's voice was difficult, and it was difficult to utter a few short words. I snorted coldly and leaned over to look at them. Why do you think Jiboda is eyeing those lands? Of course, it's because a high-speed railway station is going to be built there soon. Once it is built, the land price will increase dozens of times. Stop! Lu Fu's face suddenly turned pale, his eyes widened. You knew it a long time ago. I stood up, overlooking their embarrassed appearance and sneered, "Nonsense, I fought for this project." They looked at each other, their eyes full of despair. I turned and walked to the door, leaving the last sentence, "Give me an answer within 3 days." Night fell. A call came to my mobile phone. It was Lu Ruyan. Her voice was hoarse on the phone, with a hint of pleading. "Please let my parents go. The fault is all mine." "Come at me," I interrupted him coldly. "Are you worthy?" The other side stopped talking. The air was so quiet that I could almost hear his breathing. I said word by word, "Remember, from now on, you are nothing. If you want to save your parents, let them be obedient." After hanging up the phone, I glanced at the time on the display. The trial would be in 2 days. I turned on my computer and quickly sorted out all the materials. I felt a cold sense of satisfaction in my heart. This drama could finally come to an end. On the day of the trial, the entrance to the court was blocked by reporters. After all, this case was the financial drama of the year. A senior executive of a listed company colluded with a partner, transferred funds, leaked business secrets, and then attempted a malicious takeover. It was simply a textbook crime. I straightened my suit and walked into the courtroom through the media encirclement without looking sideways. My eyes swept over the 2 people in the court. Jiboda was on one side with a wrinkled suit and a tired face. When he saw me, his eyes were full of resentment. He gritted his teeth and said in the early morning, "You are so cruel." On the other side, Lu Ruyan lowered his head and did not dare to look at me. His silence only made me feel ridiculous. The trial began. The prosecution submitted evidence one by one, from the flow of funds to the communication records. From the recording to the process of confidentiality leakage, each item was cut precisely and meticulously. Jiboda could no longer sit still. He stood up, pointed at Lu Ruyan and shouted viciously, "It was he who seduced me. If it weren't for him, how could I?" Lu Ruyan looked up suddenly, her eyes spurting anger. "Jiboda, can you have some shame? Who was it that vowed to take me?" The judge banged the gavel and interrupted him sternly. "Shut up." I looked around at this farce with a cold look on my lips. They were more anxious than the other to find scapegoats just to reduce their own guilt. As for right or wrong, it no longer mattered. Finally, the judge announced a recess. When Jiboda was taken away by the bailiff, he swept past everyone and roared at me. "In the early morning, you will not die well." Lu Ruyan remained silent, but he clenched his fists, his knuckles slightly white. I noticed it, but I just thought it was ridiculous. Walking out of the court, reporters, a swarm of people came and handed the microphone to me. "Mr. Lu, what do you think about your wife's betrayal?" I stopped and looked directly at the camera. Every word was cold. "I only believe in one thing, that any betrayal will have a price to pay." Another reporter asked, "Then will you forgive Ms. Lu Ruyan?" I smiled with sarcasm in my smile. Once these mistakes are made, there is no chance to redeem them. This sentence was soon broadcast on the news, and at the press conference in the evening I dropped another bombshell. The company will launch a 10 billion high-speed railway station commercial complex project. After the press conference, I knew that Lu Ruyan would definitely see this news and deeply understand my intention. I not only want to swallow up his parents' land, but also completely cut off all their future options, because choosing to betray me is never a matter of one person, but the price of the whole family. At dawn the next day, Lu Ruyan stepped into the court with a determined look on her face and took the initiative to plead guilty. Standing in the judge's seat, he burst into tears and poured out the whole thing. He talked about how he used his power to pass messages to Jiboda, how he helped him transfer funds, and even the shady love affair between the two of them. Jiboda was so angry that he lost control. He jumped up from his seat suddenly, his eyes seemed to be spewing fire, and he pointed at Lu Ruyan with trembling fingers, cursing, you bitch." At that moment, the atmosphere in the courtroom was tense to the extreme, and I was sitting in the audience, my eyes were indifferent, sweeping over this pair of former allies who were biting each other. This scene was simply absurd to the extreme. The deep affection when they betrayed each other in the past has now turned into a tragic scene of dog-eat-dog. After the trial, Lu Ruyan lowered her head and was taken away by the bailiff. When she passed by me, she suddenly stopped, despair flashing in her eyes, and choked up with the word sorry. The word was barely audible, but it meant nothing to me. I did not stop and walked straight out of the court. As night fell, when I returned home, the housekeeper handed me a letter from Rian Lu's parents. In the letter, they pleaded that the family would move back to their hometown forever, and would never appear in my sight again. They only hoped that I would be more tolerant of Rian Lu for the sake of our old friendship. I threw the letter straight into the fireplace and watched it turn into ashes bit by bit. There was not even a ripple in my heart. At this time the cell phone rang. It was Chi Silly calling. His voice was low and capable. The boss's matter at the high-speed railway station has been settled. I responded indifferently, my eyes sweeping across the silence outside the window. It was a quiet night. I told them to offer a good price. After hanging up the phone, I turned around, opened the safe and took out a stack of photos. The photos recorded every bit of Lu Rian and Ji Boda over the years, from the ambiguous glances at the beginning to the embarrassing betrayal later. Each photo was familiar and disgusting. When I turned to the end, I actually laughed silently. Those things in the past are now nothing but the ashes of the past, and they will eventually pay the price they deserve. There was a knock on the door, and the housekeeper came in and asked softly, "Sir, do you need me to help you pack up Mrs. Lu's things?" I didn't even raise my head. "No, just throw them away. From today on, this home doesn't need any trace of her. Just pretend he had never been here." As the words fell, the tranquility in the house was completely frozen, without any emotional ups and downs. The full text ends here.